welcome to the Improv Summit. As always, I'm your host, Spencer. With me today, I have a very special guest. Now, I always say that I have a special guest, so I've changed it up a little bit. I take that person's first name and I take the first letter of that first name and put an adjective in front of it, and that's like, it becomes a thing. So today, I want to introduce to you Magnanimous Mike, or Michael. I don't know which one you prefer, but we can go with either.
Yeah, just don't call me late for dinner. That's all that matters.
Great, perfect. That was the answer I was hoping for. Great. All right, well, Mike, thanks so much for joining me here on the Improv Summit. Let's just dive in and start with talking about you and your improv background. What is your improv experience or your improv background?
Well, I've been doing improv for 15 years. I've studied at Second City. I've studied at Comedy Sports, and I have competed in improv competitions dating back to high school. So yeah.
Cool. Great. So you've done different improv places like Second City, Comedy Sports, and some other different like independent, off-brand improv places. What do you love about improv? What had you kind of taking all these different programs and continuing to do improv?
What I love about improv especially is the spontaneity of it. It just, the ability to go into a scene where no idea is wrong, it just leads everything to a more diverse and interesting palette for character dynamics, stakes, and things like that. And so like you're gonna, if you frequently attend improv shows like I do, you're gonna see a lot of similar tropes, but you're also going to be constantly surprised with just new characters and concepts that you would never have imagined before.
That's great. I love the idea of imagining new concepts, because with improv we can kind of imagine literally anything and make it come to life, which is so fascinating with improv. Now, that also brings me to this idea of, just as in improv we can kind of imagine anything we want, in the real world, we can imagine anything we want. Whether or not it happens or exists in the world is a whole different story. But improv can be transferable to many different professions, many different jobs, where we can transfer certain skill sets into like a non-improviser world. For
Yes.
you, do you have like a world outside of improvising, I guess is the question. And if so, what are some of those improv skills that you've been able to take into that non-improviser world?
Well, I mean, really the brass tacks of improv is communication, and really breaking down what brings two characters together and formatting a scene around that. I've done many business workshops that are built around improv in this regard, because it helps people learn to communicate with business partners, people that they are particularly familiar with, people that they're not familiar with at all, and it really helps them have more energy and be able to be more marketable in a non-creative setting as well as a creative setting.
That's great. That's great. What what is one skill that you've learned in improv that you may have not learned otherwise? And I mean, maybe you would have, but maybe you didn't learn it as in depth as you would have otherwise. That you're really like this. I'm so glad that improv taught me this.
I mean, honestly, the best thing that improv ever taught me was the concept of never really saying no or not negating an idea. And I think this is where how it works so well with the business world, because when people are told no, or if they're negated in a certain way, like defenses come up. So if you can find a way to acknowledge and affirm an idea that you might not necessarily agree with, and still move things forward in a positive way, it makes everything move a lot smoother.
Mm, that's great. I think there's so much to improv and there's so much to like dive into that I'm kind of rattling through my brain. As a Capricorn, I generally tend to have things like kind of in line, which the irony of everything is improv is never that way. I can't plan improv at all. Like that's just, I mean, there are certain things I can plan, like a format or like a structure, but I can't plan what's going to come out of people's mouths, what's going to come out of the audience's mouths, what's going to happen on stage. I can't plan any of that. And so I think that for me, like as an as a Capricorn, as technically as an introvert, as someone who has lost confidence over the years, improv has kind of challenged all of those things for me and has made me more confident. I've discovered how to just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah.
I don't prefer it, but I will do it and I enjoy it in the context of improv. So I guess where I'm going is, are there in improv, is there something that like you feel like is counter to what you as a human experience in daily life that you found is something that improv has helped challenge and help you become more successful? Like as like me as like a very left brain person, improv has gotten me very right brain. But how, if that makes any sense, what I'm
Yeah.
asking?
Actually, one of the major things that keeps bringing me back to improv is what I call creative nihilism, and the fact that if something in an improv scene works, the audience is going to remember it forever, and they're going to be clamoring. Like there have been several shows that I've been where we've had repeat audience members like, I really loved it when you did this like months ago. I don't remember it, but they do. It sticks out to them. But never has an audience member ever been like, you did this scene like 2 years ago and it sucked. Because it's in the past and they forget about it and we move on to the next thing.
So one thing that you brought up that I really think is really exciting is the idea that audiences will remember really wonderful moments in improv scenes.
Yeah.
Now, as someone who apparently has terrible short-term and long-term memory, like I just don't remember anything ever anymore. I have a hard time remembering scenes I've done, whether they're good scenes or bad scenes, or just any scenes in general, because improv feels so wonderful in like the moment that
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to recapture that feeling in the moment. But there are some scenes that I remember because it was like an aha moment or something clicked for me. Are there any scenes that you remember for any specific reason, whether as an improviser, as an audience member, as a coach, as a player, whatever it is? Are there any scenes that you remember and you're like, I won't forget this because it just was X, Y, and Z?
Oh yeah. I'm very in the moment too when it comes to improv, and most of the scenes once I've done them, they're gone. But I do clearly remember doing a comedy sports show about 2 years ago where we were doing superhero funeral, which is like everyone gives like a eulogy over a past superhero. And like the conceit of the game is you don't know the name of the hero until the beginning of it. And I don't know why, but I decided to be his half man, half horse sidekick who was also secretly his lover, which was towing the line for comedy sports a little bit because they
Hmm.
like to try and keep things as PG as possible. But it's just like there was a lot of really good humor in that scene, but there was also a lot of heart. And I actually wound up integrating that character into like some comedy sketches that I wanted to do. And I've freaking bought a horse mask. So I've got that now. So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, that's great. Are there any? This is just like this can be a controversial question in its own way for improv. Are there any scenes that you remember doing that you were like, if I had to take two, I kind of know what I would do with this scene now?
Oh yeah. Most of those scenes I would probably have immediately afterwards gone, oh, there was a great setup for this, and I didn't go that direction. There's always the times where like after a scene's over, you're like, oh shoot, I didn't really have a concrete relationship or a goal with the other character. Like every now and then you're gonna miss a fundamental and like you're gonna kind of like kick yourself a little bit, but it's over and you just gotta move on to the next scene. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the thing is before when I first started doing improv, I had this thing of like, oh, I don't want to mess up. I don't want to do it wrong, wrong. And it's like this idea of like me going like every time I was like, oh, I could have made a better choice. Oh, I could have made a better choice. When half the time my choices were, I would say more than half. I would say like 95% of the time, my choices were perfectly fine.
yeah.
It was just that my brain wanted the scene to go somewhere else. And again, that's where like my right brain, left brain kind of had to switch because it's like I can't predict what someone else is going to say. I can have a very clear, like, this is the thing I want, here's the pitch, and then they could pitch it right back with something that's a bit of a turn, a comedic twist, something that I wasn't expecting. And it's like, no, I want you to do the thing, I want you to do the thing where this is the thing. And it's so interesting because we talk a lot of in improv to like yes and to not negate, like you were talking about. And in those situations, that scene partner is not negating me. They're completely yes-anding me. They're just making a choice that I wasn't anticipating, because early on, I was like, this is the one answer. This is the answer I need you to say so I can keep doing the scene that I planned in my head to do.
Yes.
But that's why improv is so wonderful, because I can't go out there and say, okay, here's my line of dialogue. I'm going to give you exactly the answer I want because I know you're going to know exactly what I want you to say. Because that just doesn't work. I mean, maybe if we did like psychic improv and there were a bunch of psychics, I mean, maybe it could work. But like, you know, it's not always going to work in that regard, because we just, again, the spur of the moment, like for you, what does, I don't know how to ask this question. I do, but how would you describe the feeling of being in the moment in an improv scene versus spontaneously like going on a hike? What is similar between those two ideas and kind of different in its own way?
I think the spontaneity of life is really more of an individualistic choice, but the spontaneity of an improv scene is collaborative. So as you were saying, the other person's yes-anding you and taking you in a direction you weren't prepared for. 9 times out of 10, the collaborative process is going to make a stronger and more fleshed out idea than a singular vision of, this is going to be really funny, I'm setting myself up for this specific punchline. That's just stand-up. And stand-up's great. It's a completely different art form. But improv has the ability to surprise not just the audience, but the performers as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's so wonderful, because it does feel interesting to me. Like again, as a Capricorn, I don't like spontaneity. Like when I have to like switch things around on people last minute, I'm like the most apologetic person, because I don't like having to adjust my schedule last minute. I know that in an industry of entertainment, it happens all the time, and I just have to kind of deal with it. And like also, I can't predict like things that happen. Like, you know, recently getting rear-ended in a car and getting moderate whiplash and like and getting my car totaled and having to get a new car. So like that wasn't something I could predict would happen. And I had to just kind of figure it out from there and adjust.
In LA, you could probably predict that would happen at some point.
Well, the fact that it's happened twice in 6 years also is, I guess I could have anticipated it happening, but I couldn't anticipate getting into 3 accidents in 1 month. That were not my fault at all. That was fun. But that being said, I guess where I'm going with this is like, it is interesting, because the spontaneity I feel in improv doesn't feel the same to me as spontaneity in my everyday life. Like, I don't feel like I have to go into a scene and like structure it and control it and feel like I've got to have a schedule for something like I do in life. So that's what I think is really fascinating to me, is how improv has all these similarities to our everyday life and like in general how we do a lot of things, but it's just so different as the approach of it itself. That was just a long tangent. I had nothing really to ask. I was just kind of bouncing off of that and throwing out that concept that you were kind of explaining, which I thought was great. Now's a good time, though, if you have anything you want to like plug or pitch, if you have anything you want to share, now's a good time to throw that into this episode.
I am about to release a role-playing games podcast. It's improv based. It's called Alternation. It'll probably hit in the next week or so, the first episode. I'm pretty happy with it. It's my first time ever doing a podcast, so like I've been editing like lots of music and sound effects, which I don't even know if that's even necessary for a podcast, but we'll see. And it's mostly for fun, but it's a story I've wanted to tell for a long time, and so I was just like, yeah,
that's great. And we'll link we'll link it down in the description down there, so you can listen to. At this point, you probably have a few episodes in the can released, so you know, definitely check it out, and we look forward to hearing it. I guess because I say seeing it, and then I realize you don't see a podcast I guess that's why it's a podcast, but
Yes.
that's the point. Anyway, Mike, thanks so much for joining me here on the Improv Summit. I have one final question for you, and that's kind of the reason that the Improv Summit exists in general. A lot of times I get people who tell me, you do a lot of improv, Spencer. Where should I take improv? And they ask me always in that voice, so it gets a little grating
You have a
sometimes.
lot of annoying friends, I take it.
Yeah, a lot of like grating voices. Like I don't know why they all sound the same, but but this is hopefully to help guide the where you take improv voices to this channel. FYI, if you sound like that, you're a wonderful human being, and I love you. Don't change a thing. But I have a hard time answering this question because I feel like there's just a lot involved in giving that answer because there's not one specific answer.
Yeah.
So if someone came up to you and asked you that question, what would be like one piece of advice or one tidbit you'd give to someone to help guide them on their improv journey?
Well, I'm going to say two things because really there's two types of people who want to get into improv. There's actors whose agents have told them improv will look good on a resume, which is accurate, but it does not lead to people doing the best improv. But for those people, I would say probably want to do like groundlings or something because it's also going to be more focused towards sketch in the end. But for people who want to learn improv just because it's something that they've really wanted to dive into themselves, I'd say the most important thing is not where you do the improv, but who you do the improv with. So you'd want to make sure that maybe you could rope in a friend or two, someone who you really trust, that someone who would make the introductory process to improv fun and make it more of a communal experience than an educational one. And if it's something that you find really grabs you, then you'll want to do your research on the different schools of improv. I myself prefer IO's philosophy on improv, I should say. But really, it just depends on what you want to get out of it.
That's great. I think it's great, especially the what do you want to get out of it. I think that's the ultimate question, and somehow it's a very hard question to ask, and an even harder question to answer if you're not the one answering the question.
Yeah.
But I think that's great. Just ask yourself why you want to do it, and then figure out what kind of fits in that bubble of why you want to do something. And you can pro and con it all the way, and I think eventually you can get into something. And again, as we mentioned before on this show, if you go somewhere and you're not feeling it, okay, go somewhere else. It's not like you have to, just because you've committed to like one level of something, you have to do the program or you have to keep doing it somewhere. If you don't like it, go somewhere else, try something else. But I would advise you to, if you take one class and you don't like it, try taking a class somewhere else and seeing if it's the philosophy, if it's the teacher, if it's the people you're with. Like, before you say, oh, it's just improv that I don't like, I would definitely say to try a couple of different places. If one's not clicking for you, try somewhere else. You don't have to do a program if it doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. But I love that. Mike, thanks so much for joining me here on the Improv Summit. I did say that was the last question I had for you, but as always on this show, I tend to not always tell the truth, and in fact, I never do. So I actually have another question for you. And that question is, we've been talking a lot about improv. You want to do some improv?
Yes. And let's go.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, let's do it. All right, we're going to do some improv. Mike, what I need from you is the answer to this question. Do you want a location, a relationship, or a word?
Let's do location.
All right, I'm going to give you two. You pick the one you want to go with.
Okay.
The suggestions are a cottage and a limo. Cottage or limo?
Man, I'm just like, those are two great tastes that taste great together. But I'll go with
Yeah,
the
right. Great, a limo. Who would you like to initiate this scene?
go. You can go ahead and initiate it again.
All right, thank you. This is nice. This is like the slickest place I've ever been in.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you asked me to prom. This is so exciting.
It's like super rad.
Yeah.
Like this is like super rad.
Randy, this year has been really difficult. You know, we've been spending most of our school functions in quarantine. So actually getting out there and getting to meet our fellow students face to face and actually like dance and have fun, it's been really good for me.
I'm glad to hear that, Lisa. Listen, I don't want to be too forward, but you look absolutely stunning.
Well, thank you. I don't want to be too forward either, but I think that you look like you're right off of the red carpet.
Stop.
Yeah,
Stop. No.
your corsage is the biggest one in this entire room. It's distractingly big.
Huh. I do like to make an entrance. I don't worry, I won't upstage you.
Yeah. That's also why I put "tax the rich" on the back of my dress. You know, I wanted to make a statement too.
Can you let me see it? Let me see it one more time.
Are you trying to look at my butt?
No, I mean I'm trying to look at all of you all at the same time.
Okay. Yeah.
Looks great.
If you had said you were
Okay.
trying to look at my butt, that would have been okay.
Well, then I guess true words have never been spoken because they didn't. I didn't say them. I just implied them in its own way, but I wanted to like make it special for you.
Oh, well, thank you. Uh, it's it is a little. I will say it is a little weird that you're accompanying me to my prom as a 26-year-old janitor at the school, but you know, age is just a number for me, I guess. I don't know.
You know, this reminds me of that scene that scene in Instant Family where the one girl's texting the janitor and the parents didn't know it was the janitor and they thought it was just this like nice guy, but it turns out that he's actually a creeper.
Are you saying you're a creeper?
No, see.